Hello and welcome to Mrs. PM Reads. Let me scoot around the corner here. Hey, thanks for joining me today. We are going to continue with chapter 10 in our book, A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. And in the beginning of chapter 10, Ove had just finished repairing his lifelong home. They're calling it, I guess, his parental home, but it's where he grew up. And a jovial man has come to chat and just mentioned house insurance. So let's see how the conversation progresses. The man then asked if he might use the telephone. Ove said that would be fine. It turned out that his guest, grateful for a stranger's hospitality on a hot summer's day, had found a way of repaying his kindness. For it transpired that he actually worked for an insurance company and was able to pull some strings to arrange an excellent quote for Ove. Ove was skeptical at first. He asked again about the man's credentials, which he was happy to reiterate. He then spent a considerable amount of time negotiating a better price. "You're a tough businessman," said the man with the round face with a laugh. Ove felt surprisingly proud when he heard this, a tough businessman. The man then glanced at his watch, thanked Ove, and said he'd best be on his way. As he left, he gave Ove a piece of paper with his telephone number and said that he'd very much like to come by another day and have some more coffee and talk some more about house renovation. This was the first time anyone had ever expressed a wish to be Ove's friend. Ove paid the man with the round face the full year's premium in cash. They shook hands. The man with the round face never contacted him again. Ove tried to call him on one occasion, but no one answered. He felt a quick stab of disappointment, but decided not to think about it again. At least, when salesmen called from other insurance companies, he was able to say without any bad conscience that he was already insured. And that was something. Ove continued avoiding his neighbors, but didn't want any problems with them. But unfortunately, the problems seemed to have decided to seek out Ove instead. A few weeks after his house repairs were finished, one of his suited neighbors was burgled. It was the second burglary in the area in a relatively short period of time. The suits got together early next morning to deliberate on that young rascal in the condemned house who must have had something to do with it. They knew very well where he'd got that money for all that renovation. In the evening, someone stuck a note under Ove's door on which was written, "Clear off if you know what's good for you." The night after, a stone was thrown through his window. Ove picked up the stone and changed the glass in the window. He never confronted the suits, saw no purpose in it, but he wasn't going to move either. Early the next morning, he was woken by the smell of smoke. He was out of his bed in an instant. The first thing that came into his head was that whoever had thrown that stone had apparently not finished yet. On his way down the stairs, he instinctively grabbed a hammer. Not that Ove had ever been a violent man, but you could never be sure, he decided. He was wearing only his underpants when he stepped onto the veranda. All that lugging of construction materials in the last months had turned Ove into an impressively muscular young man without him even noticing. His bare upper body and the hammer swinging in his clenched right fist made the group gathered in the street momentarily take their eyes off the fire and instinctively take a step back. And that was when Ove realized that it was not his house that was burning, but his neighbor's. The suits stood in the street, staring like deer into headlights. The elderly man emerged out of the smoke, his wife leaning on his arm. She was coughing terribly when the elderly man handed her over to one of the suit's wives and then turned back towards the fire. Several of the suits cried out to him, telling him to leave it. "It's too late! Wait for the fire brigade!" they roared. The elderly man didn't listen. Burning material fell over the threshold as he tried to step inside into a sea of fire. Ove stood in the face of the wind by his gate and saw how scattered glowing balls had already set the dry grass alight between his house and the neighbor's. For a few long drawn-out seconds, he evaluated the situation as best he could. The fire would be all over his house in a few minutes if he didn't charge off to get the water hose at once. He saw the elderly man trying to push his way past an overturned bookcase on his way into the house. The suits shouted his name and tried to make him stop, but the elderly man's wife was screaming out another name. Their grandchild. Whew, I'm getting chills. Ove rocked on his heels as he watched the embers stealing their way through the grass. In all honesty, he was probably not thinking so much about what he wanted to do, but about what his father would have done. And as soon as that thought had taken root, there was not much choice about it. He muttered, irritated, looking at his house a last time, instinctively calculating to himself how many hours it had taken to build it. And then he ran towards the fire. The house was so filled with thick, sticky smoke that it was like being struck in the face with a shovel. The elderly man struggled to move the fallen bookcase, which was blocking the door. Ove threw it aside as if it were made of paper and cleared away up the stairs. By the time they emerged into the light of dawn, the elderly man was carrying the boy in his soot-covered arms. Ove had long bleeding grazes across his chest and arms. The bystanders just ran around, panicking and screaming. The air was pierced by sirens. Uniformed firemen surrounded them. Still wearing only his underpants and with aching lungs, Ove saw the first flames climbing his own house. He charged across the lawn, but was immediately stopped by a group of firemen. They were everywhere, all of a sudden. Refused to let him through. A man in a white shirt, some sort of chief fireman, as Ove understood it, stood before him with his legs wide apart and explained that they couldn't let him try to extinguish the fire in his own house. It was much too dangerous. Unfortunately, the white shirt explained after that, the fire brigade could not put it out either until they had the appropriate permission from the authorities. It turned out that because Ove's house now lay exactly on the municipal boundary, clearance from the command center was required on the shortwave radio before they could get it to work. Permission had to be sought. Papers had to be stamped. Rules are rules, the man in the white shirt explained in a monotone voice when Ove protested. Ove tore himself free and ran in fury towards the water hose, but it was futile. By the time the firemen got the all-clear signal, the house was already engulfed by fire. Ove stood in his garden and watched, helpless and in sorrow, as it burned. When a few hours later he stood in a telephone booth calling the insurance company, he learned that they had never heard of the jovial man with the round face. There was no valid insurance policy on his house. The woman from the insurance company sighed, impatiently explaining that swindlers often went from door to door claiming to be from their company, and that she hoped at least Ove hadn't given him any cash. Ove hung up and clenched his fist in his pocket. And that is the end of chapter 10. So now Ove's lost his house. Oh my goodness, he's just having a time. But I have a feeling in the end, it's all going to work out. We've got 30 more chapters to find out. All right, you guys. Thank you for joining me for Mrs. Pam Reads. Remember, if you have not, to go ahead and click the subscribe button and then the little bell tab so that you'll get a notification when a new video has been posted. All right, you guys, have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.